All right, I'll call this meeting to order. This is the Nottingham Planning Board, Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. My name's Dirk Rotenhuis, I'm the chairman. I'd like to just go around the room and people can introduce themselves on the board.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Gary Anderson.
John Moran.
Edward Veal.
Dirk Rotenhuis.
Susan Mooney.
Charlene Anderson.
James Perdine, Stratford Regional Planning Commission, providing contract planning services.
And Ian McKinnon is not here, so Buzz will seat you for Ian. And we have two hearings tonight, two public hearings. I just want to let everybody know, but we were requested by the applicant for case 21003 SIT for a continuance. So if anyone's here for that reason, the board will continue this when we get to that on the agenda. But that's second on the agenda, so I just want to make sure if anyone's here for that, they don't find out after the first one. We'll jump right into the first case here, which is a continued case, 21010 LLA, an application for a lot line adjustment from Mark C. and Patricia A. Wasson, and lot 70-25 LLC. Property is located at Lamprey Drive, identified as tax map 70, lots 23 and 25. The applicant and the agent is available, and we'll hear from them.
Good evening, Pete Landry, Mark Wasson. The way we left off, Dirk, I don't know if you were at the last meeting.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
Okay, that's fine.
Someone else can join in.
Yeah, I'll start it, but you guys have to finish it. The way I think we left it is you guys were looking for more legal assistance on maybe one or two issues. One being, I guess we're still talking about the road status and this and that. I suspect you'll have an answer maybe for us tonight. I don't know. We had talked about you having an attorney here, but I don't see him, so I don't know if you had a meeting, but you're gonna have to fill me in on that. The other thing, I think the other issue, correct me if I'm wrong, was whether or not, if we decide, or if it's conclusive that the section of Lamprey Drive that we're dealing with that bisects the lot line adjustment that we're doing, then we'd have a separate lot across from our existing lot that would be less than 2 acres. And I guess my question was, I mean, the other planner was thinking that perhaps you could still approve that. I guess we'd need to talk, hear from the board. I don't think you'd be able to approve that because the lot wouldn't be 2 acres. So you'd have a problem approving a half-acre lot, I think. I mean, I know I wouldn't be able to stamp it I don't think the DES would even approve it, so I don't know why we're talking about that still, because it seems to me if that's a town road, which we heard it was at the last meeting, then it's no longer a lot line adjustment. I don't know if the board agrees with me. It then turns into a subdivision because the strip now divides 2 pieces. So I'm waiting for feedback from the board as to which way, they want to go. I think the idea was, I had presented some information on, perhaps the way we viewed that road down there. Basically, the main issue was whether the dedication had lapsed time, had run out in 1985, and therefore might not have qualified for the acceptance that happened on June 8th on Article 19. And I think that was something that you guys were checking on. And then, of course, like I just mentioned, whether the other planner thought we could continue with the lot line adjustment, but then sort of CYA'd and said, well, you might have troubles doing anything on that, like building on it. So
we don't have a lot of answers yet. We have only been able to schedule a meeting with the attorney for next week. So the first, in Wednesday next week is the first time that we were able to get them to provide us any input and meet with us. So that's what we have.
That
tonight.
meeting will be the one with the BOS, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
so the way it was
At 5
left,
o'clock?
the way it was left at the last meeting, we were gonna try to schedule as early as possible, but coordinate with the town administrator, town legal counsel, and the board of selectmen, or the select board. So we've been doing that, we did that immediately, followed up, and it just, the earliest date that all those parties could get together, and it's not specific to this case, it's specific to those roads, to try to give us some guidance as a town and as a board, how to move forward with anything that happens on these roads. The earliest that possibility for that meeting was September 1st, so that's when we'll be meeting.
So you brought us here to talk about what? I mean, you could have let us know, we should have just postponed it. Now we're here. You want to talk about something else on the project, or?
So obviously, there's only a certain amount of communication that can occur.
Yeah, we have limited communication. We do
emails.
not have a planning use secretary at the moment. So we have limited communication, and I apologize to have you guys come here. So the information is that we don't have a meeting set up with
I
the attorney
understand.
until next week.
I understand. So we should come back in 2 weeks.
So that would be,
Can we come to the meeting next week?
no, it'll be a non-public meeting.
Okay, clarify, got it.
So it would be a need to continue this case until 2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks from tonight, okay.
The first.
Yeah, that's what we'll have to do.
Yeah.
Understood. And you'll have the answers, so when we come back, we'll know whether.
Well, we have input from, I mean, you need to understand that this is a very complicated situation of what happened with Article 19.
I understand. Trust
Okay?
me.
So it's not gonna be solved by the first case that comes in the door. So apologize for that,
We're on a
we're not
time-
there, we're not there.
Yeah, we're on a time limit, we just want to make sure.
Understand that.
That we,
And Pete, with history speaking the way it does, I wouldn't say this first meeting that we have, since it's only a 2-hour meeting, is gonna cover everything we need to know about these roads, so don't be under the expectation that we are gonna have all the answers to get you approved or not approved after this first session. Because there's a lot of information that needs to be provided that night, so.
But separate from that, maybe we could take a step back too. So I can't remember any case, even if you remove the road, this specific road in the warrant Article 19, if you remove that from this equation entirely, I don't remember any other case we've had where someone has tried to do a lot line adjustment with land that's on the other side of an easement, of a road. So,
you just.
If I
this-
may, there's several.
You just did one like a year ago, right in the same area.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So I don't know if it's gonna, like, I don't know what the goal was, if it was to try to increase contiguous area, because it doesn't do that. We determined
Well-
that previously with another case where a road, an access easement to a different lot bisected the contiguous area, so it doesn't create contiguous area, so I'm not certain
well.
what's being accomplished.
Well, what we would, okay, well, just fill you in if it makes, what, the difference between a private road and a public road, you know the difference between those, okay. So a private, if it was considered before the June 8th meeting, if it was considered a private road at that point, we would, we could have bought the land across the street, lumped it to the PC's gut and had a private easement, just like a power line easement, or in this case, an access easement, driveway easement, whatever you want to call it, through the lot. So therefore, there's not the restriction, we'd still be able to go across the private driveway
But
with,
you can't build on it, though.
not in the driveway, but you could have built on the other side, and you wouldn't have all the setbacks, the front setbacks you'd have now on a private road, your 50-foot or whatever you want to call it, 20-foot or 50. So that really, that's a big bear. So before, we didn't have all of that. Now we do.
Right.
That's all. So it's a huge difference, as you might know. Right.
And obviously that's.
That might be, I mean, in a way, as long as it, I suspect that again, I don't know what the town's gonna come back, the lawyers already said it's a town road. Maybe that's where it's gonna be, until there's a challenge somewhere else. I don't know, I can't imagine gonna come back and say, no, it's not a town road, but I tried to point out our position, so.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, nobody's appealed. I don't believe the town's appealed that status, based on the information you provided, and no butters and no other resident, to my knowledge, has appealed the decision that was had at town meeting, so we can only move forward with the way they are now, which is...
Figure out whatever happened. That's
Again,
what we're trying to figure out, what happened.
It's not just this one, we want to figure it out for all of them, so...
Oh, I'm sure you
we
do.
know, because you're not going to be the only,
Yeah, you will eventually,
resident that has the issue.
probably case by case, or when winter comes. Okay, well, thank you. We'll see you in a couple weeks, or
Yeah, we'll need a motion.
need a motion?
What's the date? That's what I was trying to find.
Mr. Chair, I move that we continue case number 21-010-LOA to September 8th at 7 PM.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to update the agenda online if that meeting is canceled and we go
Yes.
back from vacation to be
Again,
here?
apologize, we do not have a land use clerk.
Oh,
So
yeah, no,
the person
I
who
get it.
usually posts it
Yeah.
is no longer here.
Even the agenda, okay.
So
okay.
I think we've got it streamlined out a little bit better now.
Great.
So those things should be updated going forward.
Thank you.
All right.
I think also at the prior meeting, a document was shown that the town accepted these roads in 1966 or something like that.
Well, we're going to have our conversation with the legal counsel. Well, all that'll be discussed. All right, well, we'll move on to the next case, which has been requested to be a continuance. So again, we would request
So that's good.
and that one needs to be continued to
It's going to
the
ask
22nd, 6th.
22nd. Lorraine, do you know when?
25th?
When case,
22.
when that meeting with
22.
ZBA, when the next, no, there wasn't a quorum at the last one.
Look up zoning board, I can tell you when.
You're right, though, I think the 22nd covers.
Do the
September 21st is their next meeting?
So we can,
do it on the
So the night before your
22nd.
Yes.
so Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we continue case 21-003-SIT, the application for Tammy D. Francesco, trustee of Quota Trust, to September 22nd, 2021 at 7 PM.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Those in favor indicate aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous for continuance.
We did have that request from the applicant that came into the town administrator.
Yep. All right. Well, we still have some stuff to do. We can't go home yet.
Sorry, I added stuff to the agenda, everybody.
Yeah, Ed slipped some stuff in when it wasn't looking. We need to talk about this stuff. Why don't we take it out of order? Let's take B first, which is review rules and rules of procedure and bylaws. And then we'll get into just talking about what priorities of warrant articles we'd want to tackle before the end of the year. So you had a couple comments. I think that they've already been
Yes, they were-
added in here as far as
yes, I did that
red
on
lines.
7/12/21, July.
Looked at these, I didn't have any issue with these.
So the only thing we talked about possibly adding, and we haven't done so, I think, the last I was looking at it, and maybe James can tell me if he's heard of any movement on this, is about possibly adding in language for remote hearings, remote meetings. I think the legislature, again, what we can and cannot do is given to us, some of these are dictated to us by the state. So currently, there's no option for fully remote hearings. It looks like you can put in language to allow like a member to be out, but you can't have comment back from like a resident. Open up a hearing that way.
The current RSA requires a quorum to be physically present unless an emergency is determined to exist. And the big discussion at the beginning of the pandemic, before we got clarification, was what does that mean, determining an emergency to exist? The common interpretation was that not only did there need to be an emergency reason why you could not all be in person, there also needed to be an emergency pressing need for why you had to meet and couldn't just postpone. So I think it was the second part that most people were struggling to meet until they got clarification and relief from the governor's emergency orders. And I would expect that would probably be the pressing thing against any future emergency as well, would be why you actually have to convene to conduct business.
Is this something that we can review when this information becomes more concrete? When that information becomes more concrete about what constitutes an emergency, can we revisit the bylaws?
Oh, yeah.
And then amend them accordingly?
Yeah, we can do these at any time, so, I'm not proposing that we delay this based on that. I would say that we keep that on mind and add language in at some point in the future for that.
I'm just thinking that an emergency could be hardship of the applicant and the clock ticking out. Seasons changing
And we don't have,
lives moving on.
and currently, we also have, we don't have the IT capability currently really in this town to handle and manage a remote meeting. The towns that kind of do usually have a dedicated staff person that's job is to run cameras from mics. That part of the meeting.
So you've got your red lines in here, and look through them, fine. Charlene, did you have any?
I had made some comments which were incorporated in here, which were mainly just related to the actual name of the land use clerk, because I thought it had changed, and then also just referencing if, for whatever reason, the administrative assistant wasn't available, which I think we had talked about too.
Yep.
Just making sure that that's in the bylaws as far as
Who goes?
what individuals could kind of fulfill that
Yep.
position, so these are good.
Ed?
I will mention that a certain member of my household is happy to see that the word clerk is taken out and land use administrator is put in place, because that was an issue.
And to be honest, I don't know what the title of that position currently is. I think it varies. We can get confirmation on that.
That's what it is.
I do have a
That's what it was
question
posted as,
Perfect, thank you.
land use administrative assistant.
Because of the wording, it just didn't seem to be tight enough. That's Article 11, Section 5B.
Five B?
Yes.
Draft minutes of the minutes.
The-
Draft minutes of the meetings.
Section 5B.
Oh, it was A.
A copy of the minutes of each planning board meeting shall be provided to each planning board member, alternate member, the Conservation Commission, and will be posted at the Town of Nottingham municipal offices. We've never received, the commission, I'm speaking for the commission, have never received copies of the minutes from the planning board.
Okay, should we take it off?
Yeah, I think it's stupid, we can just get them online.
Right.
Well, it's not stupid, it's just, I don't think it's
We
necessary.
can also just change the language, you know, that this may be accomplished with the electronic posting to the town's website. I don't know if that would, if you want to change the language there or take something out.
It says to the, I mean, that is one of the edits, electronically to the website.
Well, it says additionally, though. Additionally, the minutes are, so that means you have to do, it's supposed to be like distribute, looks, the way it's reading it, you have to distribute to all those individuals, then post to the website, and hard copy.
So should we just strike out the Conservation Commission?
Yes, I think so.
I mean, there's no harm in it being there, I don't think.
But we also do not each receive a copy of the approved minutes when they are approved. We don't get them. We just get drafts, and then they get posted. But we don't get paper copies of the approved minutes.
Really? I thought they were in our packets, but maybe,
Not the approved.
No, those are
but
just drafts.
I wouldn't necessarily want
I know, I don't want more paper.
No.
paper versions printed unnecessarily, so I think we should just change the language and say, instead of additionally, the minutes are to be posted to the town of Nottingham, we could say,
I agree.
Okay. Well, that's
Copy
fine.
of the minutes of each planning board meeting shall be posted at the town of Nottingham municipal offices and on the town's website.
yeah.
Yep. I want to leave in a hard copy, though. Posted means filed? Or does that mean posted as in it's up on the wall?
Stuck on the wall for the public.
Do we do that?
Look outside.
I don't think we've.
Conservation Commission does.
I believe that they are posted, all the minutes are posted, all the meeting minutes are posted out on the bulletin boards.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's pretty standard practice.
I'm fine with that edit. Gary, did you have any other ones that you were thinking of? Or had any? Buzz, did you?
Nope.
So that edit was first line through shall be, and then strike everything all the way down to
A
posted.
copy of, and then the minutes. Or is it a copy of approved minutes?
A copy of the,
A copy of the approved minutes.
Of each planning board
Yeah.
meeting shall be, skip down to posted at the town of Nottingham, and then continue through to the end.
and on the town's website.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it.
Should we change will to shall? And will be posted? How about shall be posted?
Says shall.
That's a stronger word, shall. Shall be posted.
Says shall.
It says shall.
No, it doesn't, not there.
So I'm
Is it-
basically striking everything from provided on the first line through will be on the
Shall
third
be.
line.
Yes.
Be
So now it
posted. Okay,
reads,
I've
a
taken
copy
will
of the
out.
approved minutes of each planning board meeting shall be posted at the town of Nottingham municipal offices as a hard copy and electronically to the town's website.
Correct.
John, did you have any?
No, I read it, that's all fine.
Ed?
No, I was just looking at the joint meetings, if we need to add anything about select board, but I don't know who calls that or requests that when that does happen, but I think we're fine,
Yeah, I think we've been.
because it's including those, the zoning board and conservation, but doesn't rule out any, so I think we're fine there.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion that we?
Yep. I'll make a motion that we approve revised bylaws as amended and rules of procedures for the transaction of business.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Those in favor, indicate aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So these will be revised, and then we don't have to vote on them or accept on them.
No, I think we just have to.
This is the final.
We'll have a sign, we'll have a copy
We'll
of the
sign
sign.
it.
We'll just
this
sign it.
week. I'll email Chris and ask him to print those for us.
We just need one signature page, right?
Yeah. With the added
And we'll
date.
just make sure that the date adopted, we need to have the last page, the date added.
And pagination on each of the pages of the document.
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to the zoning changes. And, I'm sorry, James, did you put this list together, or does this?
So
these are kind of
my
a compiled of-
understanding is that the list entitled proposed zoning changes is the list that was in effect when Steph was still here. And the only edit that I'm aware that Jen has made to this was to remove everything that passed at town meeting. So I believe we have removed those items that we have already addressed. My understanding is we have not added anything since Steph left us.
Okay.
Yeah, this was just to kind of get us, Ian had mentioned it at the last meeting, just kind of get us to shake off cobwebs and kind of refresh ourselves to start thinking about this and get a plan together to address anything we want this year, since we kind of an expedited schedule with SB2. So there might be some other items that we've added to this list since that aren't on here. I remember, can kind of take a peek
Well, this was
through it.
June 2021, so that's pretty recent. And I don't know, do you know, does anybody know if this includes Dale Silva's?
I believe we used that as a starting point for the original list. For example, page 3 includes a section that says Dale's suggestions.
Right, yep.
But I was not, I think Steph did the compiling, so I don't know what was going on in her head.
Okay. So why don't we just use her list and we can add in housekeeping. Obviously, that's the stuff that just needs to get taken care of. We have building height and the flood hazard area as the two are higher priorities. Are people still seeing that those are higher priorities, or should we go through the list and reprioritize?
I know the building height came up a couple times, both with the building inspector and the fire department. The way it's written now is kind of interpretive. So if we can get a clear kind of consensus on those from those two departments, maybe working together, so that we can have something that would be pretty cut and dry to put into the zoning ordinance, I'd be fine with keeping that on.
That's a combination of fire department clarification and also Dale's, because it affects both.
Yep. Yeah, Mr. McKinnon, I think, had found some data, which might not be in our packets tonight, but some towns, I think it was Portsmouth and maybe another one, that had pretty clear definitions in their zoning with maybe diagrams to show, you know, how it can be calculated. And obviously, it's easy if it's a nice level lot, but if it's that's a slope or hillside or any of that, it can make it a little bit more difficult.
So we'll keep that. It's not a difficult one. We also want to make sure that we have time to get these done as well. The flood hazard area, update FEMA maps, and the last one we had revision was 1994. final maps are still pending.
Yeah, do we know what that means?
Do you know if those are still?
So my understanding was going back even 2 years or so now, I think they were working on it in 2019. FEMA was working on updating the flood insurance rate maps for the entirety of the greater Salmon Falls Piscataqua watershed. So that covers just about everybody, every community in SRPC's region. Some out here are split in half. Northwood, I think, is only a third in that watershed, for example. And I think they hit some snags. For example, there were questions about a levee in Farmington. And the quality of the levee would mean that either a big chunk of the town was in or out of that floodplain, depending on what they decided. So my understanding is those maps still have not been made official. And I have not heard any sort of official timeline from what was formerly OSI, that was sort of our state contact with that, about that project. We can definitely follow up. But I don't, if you were to ask me, will we have those maps in time to do the changes and hold public hearings on them in December, I would be very surprised if we did.
Yeah. So this one kind of makes sense not to pursue at this moment.
Sounds like we don't have the info.
Yeah.
Do we need to? I wonder if we need to mess with it, if there's a, you know how most things that have a date on it in our ordinances, you know, it's, or as amended.
Mm-hmm.
So, or as newly, or I was wondering if we just change it so we're not always, you know, worried about that. Or do you need to have a specific date in these?
I think we might need to actually reference the numbers of the maps. My memory of the state template or model ordinance is that they did include a place for list out your flood insurance rate maps up here at the top. So if those numbers updated, I think we would want to run it through. If that was the only thing that was changing, you might be able to run it through as a housekeeping item. FEMA changed their numbers, we're changing our numbers to match.
Well, it's funny, looking at that zoning ordinance section, it's C flood hazard areas, and then parentheses revised 3194. But the second paragraph, the following regulations in this ordinance shall apply to all lands designated special flood hazard areas by FEMA in its flood insurance rate maps dated May 17th, 2005. For Rockingham County. And then in parentheses at the bottom of that, it says amended 3805, so I don't know.
And that was
Why those numbers, why the dates are.
the 94 number stuck out to me, because my understanding was the most recent update was 2005. But if you address those and just forgot to update the effective date of that ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It probably hasn't changed since '94, so we didn't know to update it in 2005.
no, I'm saying, like, in our zoning, that's in our, the way it's written in our zoning ordinance.
Yeah, '94.
94 at the line, but then we specifically put the date in there.
Sounds like a house.
Or maybe somebody was just very prescient in 1994.
Yeah. We are a planning board, we plan ahead.
I just don't remember.
That
why
might just be a
this-
cleanup.
Why this
Yeah, that
made,
might be just a housekeeping cleanup
Yeah.
on the date that just never got changed. That 94 date never got changed.
So I think we should add that to the list of
Housekeeping.
housekeeping items where we find misspellings and things of that nature to clean.
I'm just still trying to figure out why it's in the high priority for the FEMA maps.
I think it was to keep it on the list for whenever it did get adopted, because these been in the works for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
I remember I went to a thing at UNH for it when the preliminary maps came out, and that was when Paul Colby was still here, so that was a few years ago.
Okay.
Not a
Well,
quick process.
we've got action for that. That's, okay. So these medium priorities, in addition to the steep slopes ordinance, you know, we have the proposed amendment already. It's a matter of whether we want to push that.
Yeah, and that is something that's been, it was, I think it came from the master plan, and we've had some language drawn up from Bruce Mayberry, and it seems like a lot of other communities around us do have steep slope ordinances. We kind of touch upon it in a few different spots in the zoning and subdivision regs now. Some of it was incorporated during the major rewrite that occurred a number of years ago. I think as we see more and more development of marginal land, you're gonna see more of that come in.
We can, since it's already kind of drafted and
Yeah, it seems
just
like it'd be a
revisited, it's
pretty
not a big ticket
simple
item.
one. to-
Probably the same thing with the minimum disturbance.
Yeah,
We already have an amendment, I mean, we already have the ordinance sort of drafted up, that we could just revisit that.
Has Stratford reviewed these two that were done by Mayberry?
I don't
I
think so.
believe we at least had a copy. I thought that Jen might have included it with her email, but the minimum disturbance amendment sounds like something that I also did independently with Northwood a couple of years ago. So it's something that I've worked with, and Bruce's structure may be a little bit different than mine was, but I could probably take a look at.
Both of these were done quite a few years ago, so what I'm saying is that with the changes in our, not the zoning, but the
Subdivision?
subdivision regulations, yes. Can you make sure that they match up before we go putting these forward as,
yeah, I think that, I don't know who did this. It looks like someone worked on this comparison. I'm assuming it was someone from your office, because it looks like they're referencing what we have in the zoning ordinances and what we have in the Mayberry's proposal, so.
It might have been even me.
So maybe someone at Stratford looked at it and started to,
Or a member who doesn't remember?
or a member who doesn't remember.
So those were back in 2004, I think, and we've just kind of punted on them every year because other things have come up and we didn't want to overwhelm the warrants. So when we did the major revision of the zoning ordinance or the subdivision regs, the subdivision regulations, and made it more in line with the zoning ordinance and the site plan, I know a lot of, some of that language that was in that was pulled into that document. Again, that's not in the zoning, so it's not as strict or anything, but some pieces of it may have been incorporated.
Well, those aren't big lift, that's not a big lift then. And then there's fencing. This is one of Dale's concerns, having a foot setback or on the property line with permission.
Yeah, so he must be running into some questions on that.
I think there's issues on some roads with, fence getting right on the property line, creating sight line issues and such too. So I'd say my suggestion on that is, let's see what we have room for as we go through the other ones, and if we can get it on there, then we push into the setback section. For all districts.
Well, there's a line here that does say that, Dale requests using state recommended provisions. So if there is a state guidance or an RSA already there, then it seems to match what, if it is like what we would like to have in Nottingham, then maybe we just adopt that, take out the stuff that we have.
And just use the states.
Yeah.
Where do we find that information? In the RSAs or?
I am not aware of an RSA that deals with fence location, because that would seem to be related to is a fence of structure and all of those other questions.
Coming from Dale, I'm guessing it's probably in the building code. It's probably from the building code that is in there, which maybe it's not appropriate for the site. We'll have to dig into that one a little bit more. ADUs, I know this has been brought up multiple times. That one's a little bit bigger of a tackle, I think. Although the last, James, you can correct me, last I knew there was a new state guideline or requirement for ADUs that was coming out. It was drafted, but it had to do with the number of bedrooms and square footage. You know if anything's happened with that recently?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
So the accessory dwelling units,
Yep, and there was the change in state law in what, 2017?
Yeah, around there.
yeah, but there was supposed to be something that was newer than that, like
I remember there being something, I feel like there was something recently about detached, and it was that like towns may allow them, it was a may, it wasn't shall or.
There was a lot of guidance that came out after that law was passed that looked at what does this require of you and what does this still allow you to regulate. So there was a fair amount of guidance from like 2018 that was talking about you can still require them to be attached and you can disallow detached. You can still require owner occupancy of one of the units. Several other examples like that. So if you'd like us to pull some of that guidance, it seemed like everybody had a fact sheet from OSI to NHMA. We can definitely pull some of those and circulate them again. I am not aware of any legislation that has passed that has further refined that, but I can definitely follow up.
maybe it wasn't a
Personal
bill.
experience with those. What I would maybe put into the conversation is maybe more specific detail on the how it and where and that kind of thing as far as the attachment goes. 'Cause that's been confusing. We've built about 5 of those, so it's never exactly clear.
The sort of clarification about how the unit actually relates to the primary structure.
How it's attached, how it doesn't need to be heated, really those details. So, yeah. And I don't know if that's been brought up in the state realm or at all.
So we have it, so this was added at some point, because in some towns it just said attached, it was attached, so people were doing trellises, throwing a fence up between a house and a garage and saying, well, it's attached. So we specifically require that they have an interior door provided between the principal dwelling unit and the ADU.
I'll give you an example. For instance, one that we built, we were able to use an existing porch if we heated it to make that the access to the main dwelling from the ADU. So that's just one example.
Yeah, so it became like an enclosed porch.
Question mark there. So.
I would speculate that once you start getting into things like that, you're probably never going to get the perfect code. There's always going to be something that's going to end up needing the building inspector or somebody to make a judgment call and say, you've crossed a line. I don't know exactly where the line was, but I know you passed it at some point. So we can take a look and we can workshop it if you want, but somebody will find a creative way around probably whatever we write up.
We don't see a lot of ADUs, right? Come before the board?
No, we don't see a lot come before the board.
Because
It doesn't mean that they're not.
the ones
Yeah.
we worked on and haven't come here, they've been, permitting process, period.
Yeah.
So that's why it's just helpful for the building inspector to have clarification.
I think there's been a couple that's gone to zoning for specific site reasons, specific lot reasons or specific reasons with the dwelling itself. So I'm fine with, like you said, I think this is a bigger item, and unless there's a big push for it, I'm fine, I'd be one to push this.
I would push it out till next
Keep it
year.
on the radar.
Yeah, because this will occupy a bit of time.
Yeah,
The year after next?
or the year after next.
So let's go to these other ones, which are, what is it? Separate conforming and non-conforming lot regulations. So that charts a paragraph. Sections, I think she did some of this already.
When you say she, meaning
Oh, sorry.
Steph, or?
Yeah. I mean, we did something to clean up relative to tables. Maybe that was just the setbacks. Conforming and non-conforming.
Yeah, in the setbacks table, we have pre-existing non-conforming lots and then all other lots. We did put tables in, that was new. But there are a bunch of other sections that discuss non-conformity and non-conformance.
So I read this as pulling anything related to nonconformity into a single section.
Well, we do have, I think, section U for non-conformance, but I think it would be helpful probably to just revisit that, whether we do anything with it this year or not, just to see if there's any way to possibly clean it up easily.
Let's go to the low priority ones.
We did that, yeah, we did the sections, we did that.
Clarify major and minor.
I still think that was a one-off thing, though I think that we discussed possibly adding to that at a prior meeting was areas where there may be other permits required, like federal permits and things like that, if we should add some kind of language into the either major or minor that to address those.
Proper licensing and stuff.
Yeah.
And this was also pre-COVID, so there's probably a lot of home occupations more than there were before, and most of them minor.
Yeah, there's a couple majors that are out there right now that are pretty frightening.
Yeah, so that part, I think we could just touch base with Dale and see if there's something we should make, the building inspector.
This one here, maybe it's just another point, just to have some discussion on it and some examples of just the maximum lot coverage percentage. Most towns are at 30%, we're at 40.
I wouldn't mind dropping that down to 30.
Doesn't that make it more restrictive for conservation development?
I think it would be more room for plants.
Well, I mean,
My take on it.
I was wondering, could some of that be addressed in the lot disturbance and landscaping, if we're gonna work on that? I'm just
Yeah.
trying to look, see what,
There's an overlap there,
oh,
maybe.
You'd have to look at,
This is town center district.
yeah, so that's the town
Yeah,
center
so,
district.
yeah, so it wouldn't,
I don't know if we even have a maximum lot coverage for the residential. And then commercial, industrial is 50%, which is probably pretty high.
So, yeah, maybe we should leave it at 40, because
Yeah, I'm
we're
gonna
gonna have commercial, and we're gonna be
I'm gonna
talking
withdraw
about parking
my-
lots and some other things that we
Yeah.
can have more coverage, allow more coverage.
Yeah, that would be consistent with town center district.
So junkyards, more than two, consider adding no more than 2 unregistered, uninspected vehicles.
I thought we did add that.
That's what I was gonna say the same thing.
I thought it didn't get passed.
I don't remember.
Section
I want to say it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I was under the assumption that for a long time that's what it was.
And I thought the state law, I think the RSA mandated, regulated what junkyards.
Maybe that's
are
where it
considered.
is.
My understanding was that it was a state policy.
know we can-
And that's sort of limited to secondhand from the Farmington building inspector, but, yeah, I thought that was just sort of a standard definition. We could follow it up.
So the maximum lot coverage, not to go back to that, but I don't necessarily, I don't see it in the residential agricultural. We have it in town center, commercial industrial, the aquifer protection district, we have different coverages. So there's a couple of areas we'd want to probably have to look at, possibly adding that to residential agricultural district, and then and then looking at the open space side of it too, to see if we would need to if that amount would be sufficient to allow for those to continue.
Okay, so what was the plan on junkyards?
I think that Stratford's is going to look into what the state says.
So right now, our zoning ordinance just
It's
junkyards.
just references that RSA.
All right.
If I recall back a long time ago, talking 16 years ago, we had, this junkyard ordinance used to actually list certain items that they considered junk. And because they were so outdated with today's times, is that we switched to the RSA from New Hampshire. Because we had a case where we had to go out on the zoning board to visit a property in Nottingham regarding the junkyard ordinance, because neighbors were complaining about it. And there were certain items that were listed, and there's certain items that we found that were so far out of, because they were like stuff from,
Out of the century?
yeah, like from the 20s, and people don't have this stuff anymore that they listed in there, that we switched it to the RSA for New Hampshire.
You can have no more than 2 unlicensed carriages.
Yeah, and there was a bunch of different,
Boys and buggies.
Or field equipment.
right, there was a lot of stuff that I've ever, I mean,
And we do
I
have,
think it was like cotton barrels you couldn't have, it was just some weird stuff that it was listed that,
and we do have a definition of junk in the zoning ordinance as well. One of those definitions is 2 or more unregistered vehicles.
That's where it
That's
is.
probably where we're gonna.
We can check with Dale to see if, again, if these 2 parts are sufficient.
because I think one of the two is, when you read that, is what some people consider junk and what other people consider junk can be interpreted, and
Right.
it's not junk, it's an antique. Okay.
Then get an antique plate for it.
Well, we're talking about a car.
Let's keep going. So impact fees, applicability, town of Nottingham is responsible for, committed to the provision of public facilities. Clarification to applicability.
Yeah, what does
Where
that-
can we apply
what does
impact
that-
fees?
Yeah.
I think that was taken care of. I think this goes back to,
Because we added the rec impacts.
It might be that I might be wrong. But how like, there was that 5-year tail out and everything, but that's long since gone. That was back from when they were originally adopted.
Well, we updated the impact fees, what, 3 years ago? So I bet you if we look at that, we probably cleared up a lot of this.
So then it's new provisions restricting adult entertainment bookstores, marijuana grow facilities. Okay, so,
That's, stuff is a big lift.
yep.
That's a future.
In memory again on this is that permissive ordinance, if we're listing out what's permitted, everything else is non-permitted by nature. If you list it in as a non-permitted, it's just like anything, it's then appealable for
Yeah.
variance.
You don't want to list it. Yeah, so I think we strike A. And then B is future. And B and C are future, accessory structure.
Yeah, C is interesting. That's where like you could have a lot that has a garage, but no home with it.
Back in the day, people would do that while they were building their house. They would build a little structure they could live in, and do their septic, water, and then build their primary house.
I think these, number 13, I think they came to the planner, that the building inspector that was between Dale and Paul.
I forget his name.
Because I remember this restriction, I remember this 13A, and we said the same thing, no, we don't want to do that. And so I think 13 came from him.
Yeah, I don't think we're really gonna act on any of those on 13.
No. Then cross it out.
Driveway setback, that's probably not a big lift. We just-
That would be good, that would be a simple fix.
I think it's driveway and roadway. I don't think we have a setback for either right now. And I think it's, unless it's a shared driveway, I think having a setback would be neighborly, and especially for new roads.
Mhm.
Considering the one that was planned for Flutter Street, right along the stone wall of an abutter, lived in a non-conforming lot, tiny, tiny house, it would have been horrendous.
So we think the driveway setback we want to tackle this year?
I think that would be just an easy fix.
James, you know, off the top of your head, other towns that, do they generally have a setback for driveways and roads?
I know Northwood's best, and the way they shoehorned it in was paved driveways or structures,
Yep.
and unpaved driveways are not, and therefore the driveway has to follow structure setbacks if you pave it. If it's a dirt driveway, you can put it right up to the line.
Yeah.
And actually, it took us probably 5 years to even clarify that definition because it had contradictions in itself.
But that brings up a question, if you do that, which I'm not in favor of that, by the way.
It's not something.
Because
that I
then
would
if somebody used it for
advocate.
5 years and they
Somebody
decide to
is
pave
gonna
it, they
figure
can't, they
out.
just pave it and there you go.
That's what I was gonna say.
They've already proved their driveway to be there on the lot property line, and they just paved it 5 years later.
That's the first phase of the paving.
Right.
I've seen a lot this year get paid.
So, I mean, I don't think it's gonna be tough for us to put a regulation, whether you're 15, 20 feet or whatever we can say off a property line to make a driveway. It's just courtesy.
And I don't think there's a
But what about
permit
a
needed.
development road in, though? That's another matter altogether.
Well, I think we,
Well, developments are all, those development lots are gonna have 150 feet of frontage or whatever, 200 feet of frontage. So you're gonna have plenty of room in there to set your setbacks of a driveway.
True, if we have setbacks in the regs.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we don't.
Right, but I'm for putting a driveway setback, I'm not speaking against it, I'm speaking
Okay.
for having, setbacks on driveways from property lines.
okay. All right, well, we got something to do. Tiny homes.
That's another one where, in my opinion, this keeps coming up, but the state is kind of, has the ball in their lap
Still a
right now.
moving
and
target.
It's still a lot of discussion about it, but it hasn't anything on it. So
I think there has been a little bit of progress. Most of my experience as a planner for the last 6, 7 years, even in Columbus, Ohio, was don't talk to me, talk to the building inspector because it's a building code issue. I think with the state finally adopting the most recent version of the International Building Code, there is an addendum in that addresses tiny homes and sort of makes them viable and works out the kinks. So I think probably in the next couple of years, we're going to see people doing more zoning for tiny homes and figuring out how they work. I think Dover is in the process, for example, of figuring out, can we put a bunch of these on one lot? But it's still sort of in the prototype first early adopters in New Hampshire. I certainly don't think we've seen pervasive demand yet.
I think,
So if we're doing it this year, we could try it, but it might be a little bit,
Premature.
blazing new trails and.
no, I think the way right now it's handled is, if it's permanent and it's connected to utilities, it just happens to be a small home and it meets building code, then it's a home. And if it's on a trailer and it's not permanently connected to utilities and everything else, then it would go to our RV permit process, which is allowed for a certain amount of time, one per lot, for up to 6 months a year. I think it's the language, by permit from the code inspectors.
But I think we do have to call it out and call it what it is, tiny home, and put it somewhere, because otherwise you will have very possibly just one showing up on a piece of property and without any permitting. And then it'll be up to the building inspector to figure that out.
But then that's a mobile home.
Right, that, I consider a tiny
It's,
home.
yeah, it's
I
a
think
mobile
it-
home. If it's on wheels, doesn't matter if it's big or small. It's a
Trailer.
It's a camper.
Usually it
Yeah.
comes down to who it's stamped by. There's like a HUD stamp that goes on it if it counts as a manufactured home.
Right.
There's a separate stamp or certification that goes on it if it's classed as an RV, or if you're just stick building something that's really small. As long as you meet building code, that probably passes muster as a single-family home. I think would be how most people would look at it.
The other part comes up and it brings it back to the town, is how do you assess for them and everything else?
James, a couple of years ago, there was a person over at Deerfield Fair who was an advocate for tiny homes, and he was setting up a small area for tiny homes in Lee for veterans who didn't have any place to live. Are you familiar with that venture at all? And I don't
I
even-
can't
those-
say for certain. I remember seeing quite a few, if it's the one that I'm thinking of, I remember seeing a lot of angry letters to the editor after it didn't work. I can look into it, but I think that was right around the time that I was coming here, and
Yeah.
it was sort of, again, before we had answers to all of the questions.
4 or 5 years ago.
I do
Yeah.
remember hearing about that.
And separately, you see some communities doing, they're not considered tiny homes, they're small, like, small efficiency type structures, and they're connected, and they share parking lots or wherever else, and you have more density on a lot to provide additional housing, and it's generally seen as much more manageable and secure for, than, say, a traditional manufactured home, or what people call mobile homes. You know, and it can help people that have like a more consistent, like utility costs and things like that, because they're efficient and everything else. I think Concord has a bunch, I can't remember what road that is on. And they look like, kind of like, almost like little condos or little capes,
Yeah, little condos.
but they're
yeah.
attached, you know, somehow to at least 2 or 3. But that's I think that's separate. I think that goes back to the definition of tiny home, you know.
Yeah, but
Right.
those could also be attached into the public sewer, where you have 3 tiny homes.
Yeah, those are just small homes.
Right, where are you gonna put that sewer? You
They're-
can't put those
I
on
mean,
a,
they're
Right.
permanent, they're on a permanent structure, and those are just small homes, small footprints.
So I
Oh, yeah,
don't know, I say we continue to punt on this until we get.
yes, I think it's.
I think, yeah. Put it in the future.
All right, so then we're gonna go into this new addition since the last update.
This might be mine.
That means,
I think the first one, default project, I think this might be mine where we've gotten into the habit of, on conditional approvals to say with, you know, standard conditions or things like that. So I think whether we put it in the zoning subdivision regs or anything like that, or just have a document of our standard items, which is usually monument set, Mylars received, you know, things of that nature, all the permits received.
well, we do have a, you know, an order of conditions.
Right, but we've been getting in the habit of just saying standard conditions, so I don't know if, to make sure we're not getting stuck with.
But actually, the written one does come out with
the
those
conditions.
same conditions on them.
Okay.
A punch list, so to speak.
Other than that, I don't know what that one is.
Yeah, because I've got, whenever I go in to check on plans are complete.
It's overthinking it. It's default. It's literally default, like when a project defaults. It's true, and I think this goes back to bonding and things like that for a project. To restore the site, should the project default? Maybe.
So are you talking about like vesting statute, and at what point you would consider
This is in.
something to be abandoned, or?
The only time that word default comes in the zoning ordinance is under conditional uses.
Well, revisit it, see if it's, see if it's something.
Or are you looking for, like, we've got a major and a minor classification, and we each have category, or things that say, if you're this, this, and this, you're a major, if you're this, this, and this, you're a minor.
Anything
and
else is
either
default.
one says anything else is one or the other?
I don't think that's the case we're referring to.
I don't know, pretty vague.
Yes, it must be yours, because the next one's yours.
The next one's definitely mine.
Account for curves and more detail, frontage definition.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of in a gray area, or I think we should have additional language as to what is considered frontage and how to measure it. In most towns, so right now it just says frontage, 200 feet on a class 5 road or better, but we don't say anything about if it's a cul-de-sac and it's a curve. If it's a corner lot, can you add them together? Because that's 2 roads or anything like that. We don't even mention I don't think we'll have any of these in town, or if we do, it'd be very one-off. I think with like frontage on, front and back, which one do you consider front setback? Which one's back setback? that part I wasn't necessarily looking to get into, is more to address accounting for curves, in more than one street or road.
Well, I think the frontage, we do count for curves along, it's whatever the survey is, the property line. Property line, it goes along a curve, then that's the distance of that curve. It's the arc length of that curve.
Right, so it's a way to get in, and you see it around cul-de-sacs, especially if they put a cul-de-sac in, now they get 5 lots, because you just made 1,000 feet. But if it was straight road, not that you could do that, you wouldn't have that many.
It's still a distance of frontage.
So
It's
frontage
still-
along
it's-
the road is really what it is.
Yeah, I guess, I'm used to seeing it in other cities.
Somebody would increase the circumference of the circle at the end of the cul-de-sac to try and get additional frontage on that circle.
You could. If, I don't know because I don't know if our language in the road standards defines how to shape the end of the cul-de-sac, but either way,
I think if you didn't, to your point, if you didn't define otherwise, and you just said you need 150 feet of frontage, full stop, I would say a corner lot, you get to count both sides. I would say a cul-de-sac, you get to count, every portion of that arc. Somebody builds a private road right into the middle of a lot, and you're sold on the definition of it as a private road, well, I guess you're talking class 5, but if they somehow manage to get this thing that just goes straight in and I've got frontage on both sides, that frontage adds up unless you define otherwise.
right. And I think it's standard in other towns that they define it. Because otherwise, yeah, it can be curve or, arc or a straight line.
I'm not sure I've seen definitions for frontage that try to take out the arc of a front property line.
Yeah, I thought I used
I've
straight line
definitely seen
distance.
definitions that say you only get to count one side of the lot as your required frontage.
Mhm.
So you need to meet your 150 on one corner, you can't go around the corner. But I don't think I've seen telling people to calculate the frontage in a different way.
And it makes sense to not do that, because then you could potentially, the only way to put a driveway in would be right next to an intersection. If you're, because if the line was so short, 100 feet, instead of 200 feet, you remove the driveway from the intersection.
So what you're saying is in the arc, it might be 200 feet, but going as a crow flies, it might only be 150.
Well, the landowner has, that's their property.
Right.
They own up to that curve line. So they should be able to count for that curve line.
Right.
It's area. You can't take away their area of their property and draw a line that just says, "Shh,
But
that's your frontage."
Yeah, it's a way, though, to get additional lots in, on a major subdivision. Because you can, both on the corner lot, if we don't define it, and on the curve, you'll see these odd-shaped parcels, especially around the curve, where you got this little neck, potentially going to a bigger lot, and then you just have the lollipop at the end to, yes, they've got their 200 feet if you go through the curve, but you'd have less, and you'd have a better width and everything else if
Would it
was a
matter
straight
though
line.
if we had setbacks for driveways?
For that, probably not so much. No. I'm fine, it just thought of something, it jumped out at me, and I could kind of research a little bit more and just see what some of the towns around us are doing. I feel like it came up, I think I saw like really good definitions in Rochester when I was looking at a project there and something else.
Okay, well, let's continue. So non-conforming section giving too much authority to the building inspector, suggested by Dale and Chris. It's a non-conforming section.
So I think that goes back to the earlier, right, that we talked about maybe like putting together some kind of chart or something of conforming and non-conforming. Is that what,
I think it refers to the fact that there's a lot that's undersized, and then the building inspector can determine whether someone can build a house on it. Doesn't even have to come to the planning board.
Well, we have non-conforming
So
lots and
that's on
non-conforming
page,
uses.
that's on page 36. Number 2. It says the non-conforming lot of record which does not meet requirements for area or town requirements may be used for purposes provided in that district in which it is located. If the code enforcement administrator determines the use of that lot will not create potential health or safety with regards to waste
Got it.
disposal and water. So I just think it means an undersized lot, and he can give permission for people to build on it. Without input from,
Research that a little bit more.
that's the only section in which the code enforcement administrator is mentioned. All the other sections, if they want relief, it goes to the ZBA.
I think the de facto situation would end up being exactly that, though. Because if they're asserting that they have pre-existing non-conforming rights, that would mean that they are entitled to the use without making the exception. If they need relief, they need relief because they don't comply. But if they are pre-existing non-conforming, that means they complied with the regulations that were in place, and the regulations changed on them. And I think the sort of de facto way to resolve that would be they go to the building inspector and try to pull the permit for what they want anyway, and he has to either approve them or deny them. And that has to happen before they get to ZBA, sort of regardless. I think Dale, when people come in and they know that they're gonna need to go to ZBA, he still tells them to apply so he can reject it, so they have their rejection in hand.
Oh, I
You
see.
have to have the rejection in hand before you go to the ZBA.
Yeah, so I don't think, I think that's going to be the process no matter what. And if Dale prefers to be a little bit more conservative in terms of what he issues permits for and send more people to the ZBA, I think he probably has the ability to make that decision and say, you know what, I prefer to have the board resolve this than me. But I'm not sure how to change that code to take that discretion away from him. He's gonna need to exercise it in some capacity.
So we should just tell him to toughen up?
Right.
Your words, not mine.
Well, that's my question, is
Because
why is
apparently
there too much authority?
he's uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And so is Chris, so.
We can ask again for them to give us kind of more detail on that, because
yeah, that's
these are
what I
pretty,
think. I
pretty
think
old.
it's worth a question.
Now, James, special exception versus variance. Special exception, variance has its criteria.
Yep,
It's mandated by the state.
yep.
Special exception,
You set the criteria, you list them in zoning.
which we don't do when we, in this section. So for non-conformance, our language says, they can go to the zoning board. It's under section U. B. The zoning board of adjustment may, upon application, grant a special exception in accordance with Article 5C, permitting the enlargement of a single-family home which does not conform to an applicable setback or district requirements, so long as the proposed enlargement will not increase the existing nonconformity, will not violate any other provision of the zoning ordinance, and is permitted use in that district. So is that basically our criteria? Because 5C does not
just,
Does not
when
lay
you
out.
read that, I was assuming that the criteria for the special exception are in 5C.
No, 5C only states the zoning board of adjustment. The function, consider applications for special exception or variance.
5C is just administration and enforcement.
Public hearing shall
So
be
it doesn't
held,
list
cost incurred. It doesn't.
So
talk
it
about-
says the ZBA does variances and special exceptions. It doesn't list special exception criteria.
No, and we added that, we added criteria in another area that, because we realized that was missing in last year in the 2 spots.
So
Open space.
then I would say that yes, if I had to tell you how to work that section today, then those other things that you read, the it doesn't increase degree of nonconformity, et cetera, I would say those are your criteria as they stand.
Yep.
If you want those to be your criteria as they stand, I would maybe make that more explicit, pull them into a bulleted list. ZBA may approve a special exception provided the following criteria are met. Does not increase, does this. And then if you want to discuss whether those are the best criteria, the only criteria you want to add more to them, we could, but I would say at least changing the formatting to make that clear and explicit would be helpful.
Housekeeping item for some date.
All right, let me keep going here. Dale suggestions fence, we talked about that. A grade average rather than lowest point. Percent sure of that one. Noise ordinance.
That may be relating back to the memo from the fire chief that you have.
Noise ordinance.
We had a conversation with a guest at our meeting on Monday about noise ordinance.
What did they say?
Well, he was talking about some issues that he was having with noise in his neighborhood, with certain neighbors and stuff. You know, and then other people reiterated about noise with guns and stuff like this. One of our problems with Nottingham is that enforcing a noise ordinance is very tough. So the recommendation of the board was that if anybody wanted to put a noise ordinance out there, was for them to go write their own warrant article and see what the town says about it. And let the voters decide on because I mean, that's what we would do here. If we wrote a noise ordinance, it has to go in front of the vote and let the people decide. So, you know, I wouldn't say the board was favor or in favor of a noise ordinance, but it was something we weren't about to tackle.
Well, we can certainly look at a couple model noise ordinances from area towns. But in the past, I remember that we had neighbors behind us that had boisterous, loud parties that went into the little hours of the morning, and the police came by and said, you need to turn it down, you're a public nuisance.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah, in most cases, that's how situations like that. But there were some incidences of people on Stevens Hill firing their guns at a different time. Well, that's Fish and Game's problem. And, you know, that's, you know, we don't want to put our officers in any type of situation like that. You know, but there's different, you know, fireworks on the 4th of July. Some people don't think they should be in, you know, even though you might have this big, beautiful field in your yard. But, you know, is that proper to light them off there? You know, so there's a lot of things that noise ordinance would have to be really starting to get specific, or how vague do you make it? So again, that's why it was something that would be, if we were going to tackle that, that's going to be a lot of discussion.
Yeah, and fireworks are always a iffy thing too, because I know a lot of towns that have predominantly volunteer fire departments don't allow them specifically because of,
Sure.
you know, the potential there.
Yeah, we have 3 lakes in town that I'm sure on the 4th of July or on a good
John-
summer night.
John, you remember when the town used to have fireworks right down here, back 20, 30 years ago.
we might have fireworks for the 300th anniversary. But those are done, the reason too is, I mean, any fireworks town puts on is obviously professional. We're not letting homeowners go and blow this stuff up.
Yeah.
You know, this is more of a noise, you know, going off at 1 or 2 in the morning, but then usually the situation, if you go, you know, with some of the problems what they were saying is that neighbors they want to complain about it, but they don't want to go to the source and complain about it, because they're afraid of the relationship that's going to occur by going to the source.
Or not knowing what they're gonna find there.
Right. So, again, if you're having a disturbance, if somebody's playing loud music at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you want to call the cops, that's your best avenue. Have them go and address the situation. But, again,
I think this we'd spend a lot of time on this
I
as
think it
well.
would be quite a bit.
You know, there's a lot of also, you know, the town's not equipped for even monitoring noise if it's something besides just, you know, an intermittent noise.
Yeah, and I think it gives, it can give an enforcement option, you know, if there's that language there, say we do have noise, but, you know, how does it apply, just like anything?
Right, is it noise, could be a noise ordinance, just be specific to certain things, like heavy construction equipment being used a certain amount of times?
Yeah.
Or are we gonna limit the restrictions of people? Because at 8 o'clock at night in June, when the sun's bright and ready, they still wanna go shoot in their backyard. Is that, I mean, again, that's why I think there's too much discussion to have, that if we have all this other stuff to tackle, then, yep, that might not be something we need to be at right now.
Okay, let's see if we can wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. Good. I'm not sure what passed at 2020 town meeting means. Does that mean that these housekeeping items supposedly passed, yes?
Yeah, that's the
All
stuff
done.
that passed.
Okay, so that's already taken care of.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that was quick. It's not gonna be 10 minutes. And then this stuff passed at 2021,
Yeah, good.
So we're done?
Can we,
So,
can we
yeah,
recap?
Yeah, let's recap. Well, we've gone through that list. So building height, sounds like, let's look at that.
Yes.
Yes.
Steep slopes and minimum disturbance, since they're already kind of drafted, maybe we just get those updated to see if they're able to move forward.
Yep.
Let's, maybe some of the housekeeping things, we'll just leave it as housekeeping and we'll just clean it up if we can. Where did we land with the fencing? Shall we,
We said that that's more of a building code.
okay. So
That's what my notes say.
ADUs are gonna take too much time
Yeah.
for what we have right now. Conforming, non-conforming. Had some discussions, I'm not sure we exactly,
We did parts of that, it looks like, with the charts.
okay.
We said we would try to revisit it.
So let's put that one on the lower priority part of it.
Yeah. We said, look at likely not bring forward, is what I wrote down.
The homework item on that for everybody is just kind of,
Yeah.
pretend you have a non-conforming lot and you want to read through it and see what sections apply.
Okay, major versus minor home occupation, we're not gonna be addressing those.
We pushed it out.
Lot coverage, I think we'll do a little bit of homework on kind of our lot disturbance and open space and stuff like that.
Where are we?
See where we're at. We're on 10.
And it looks like, we might need to
Yeah, I
add
just
on.
lost my place.
Zag.
I think it's over. Okay, oh, gotcha.
Junkyards, we're not gonna work on. Impact fees, we're not gonna work on. Again, maybe this non-conforming permissive ordinance, maybe there's just trying to figure out something, to do some homework. Driveway setback, yes. Tiny homes, no. And I'm not saying no or not ever, but I'm
Right,
just saying
future.
we're
Yeah,
gonna.
future.
Okay, that's a better term, future.
And Airbnb future.
Yep, Airbnb future.
What would be our questions on Airbnb?
I don't know, we're gonna talk about it in the future.
Okay. Perfect, that's good enough.
I think a lot of towns started regulating short-term rentals and things like
Okay.
that, so.
I don't think we're gonna run into the issues with it.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there's probably a few that are on a lake, but what's the difference between shooting it on, I mean,
Enough said.
non-conforming, okay, that's the same one, either, who's gonna tell Dale he's gotta toughen up?
Sue,
I will.
no, we were gonna ask for more clarification on
Yeah,
that.
we'll
Do you want me to do that?
do the soft sell and then you.
Or do you want to do that?
I'll do it.
Yeah, I think anything with Dale, is it's not to push it back onto him, but to say, you know, what do you propose on this? So we can.
Sure.
Help us out.
Okay. Did we skip building height?
No, that
No,
was the
we're
first
doing
one.
that.
Okay, so, yeah, some of them.
So that's the grade,
Driveway
yep.
setback, do we keep that on the list?
Where'd the driveway setback go?
It's number 14.
Oh, yeah, I put an exclamation point in
Number
yes.
14.
I must have passed right
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
So the driveway setback, sorry. Tiny homes, future. That's the fence, grade, noise ordinance,
Future.
future. The rest of the stuff we've done, so that's doable.
That's doable.
I think the biggest time is gonna be really spent on maybe even trying to figure out this non-conforming, conforming. I'm sure we're all set with consistency. And then whether we really want to move forward on the steep slopes to the public and minimum disturbance to the public. 'Cause
So is this just for, because we didn't have Stratford Regional when I was on the planning board before, is this stuff that Stratford would work on, or is it stuff that we'll work on in like workshop meetings, or how are you doing that now?
I think, we're not sure yet, but I think we'd like Stratford's help to help guide us. And then, we can workshop it with them.
So one thing I think that we could probably drop on Stratford's lap right now.
So would
is
you
the-
like us to begin compiling things related to these issues, or?
Yeah, what I think you ought to do is, we ought to get the stuff that we're postponing to the future, get it off the sheet, so we don't have to keep revisiting it.
Oh, yeah, we can definitely, now that I have sort of circled the what we're working on
Right.
this year, we can do just a town meeting 22 list of what we're doing.
That's the place to start.
But where you say, we're going to think about, what needs clarity with non-conformities, who is doing the thinking? Do you want us to start working on these are all of the sections that relate to non-conformities, and here are some ways that they might contradict? Do you want us to start working on a memo, or would you rather go into a workshop and we talk it through with all of you before we start doing work on it?
Let's do a workshop, because we've got a lot of, opinions here. I'd like to get them out on the table, and then you can kind of shape that,
Okay.
and then we can come back with more refinement in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having tasking them with reviewing the two drafts that Bruce Mayberry gave us to see where they,
Sure, those are already drafted, so
Yeah,
why
those
not?
could be a quick,
Those, we'd like you to take a look at, the
Steep slopes
minimum
and-
disturbance and steep slopes.
yeah.
So we have drafts of those.
Okay, and you said, since those are a little bit old, am I taking a look for, how those still play with the regulations you have now, and whether we need to further refine the draft? Okay.
And then was Ian did he have information that he was gonna bring for the building height stuff? I think he said he had some language that,
I think he emailed them through from, I think it was Portsmouth and
Portsmouth.
different town.
Well, are they the ones that are listed here? He's got this Newcastle and Conway,
oh, maybe.
because on this list, there are two examples.
Yeah, he may-
Yep, it's probably those two.
But we do have, you know, the letter from
The chief.
Chief with some Pythagorean theorem. So that should be clear, right?
I mean, I think that's another one that Stratford could start to work on too. It's like the build a night one.
Yep.
Just, I think those three could start housekeeping, and I mean, the non-conformity, I think, is a workshop.
So then let's look at this. Are you clear on that? Sorry, I don't want to jump ahead.
Mostly. So start looking at building height for how we can pull that together. We want to get a housekeeping amendment in, at least for those two things, and if something else gets thrown in. So I can definitely start.
And the building height might be simply taking what another town has that has
Correct.
clear, pass it by Dale, pass it by the fire chief and say, does this work? Does this seem like a good document for both of you? And we can incorporate that.
So in terms of directives that SRPC should be working on, the housekeeping thing, since we know that we'd like to do some quick fixes anyway, building height for seeing how we could pull that together in a way that makes sense for this ordinance, and the 4 and 5, the steep slopes and minimum disturbance.
Yep.
Again, taking what was drafted and making sure it still fits in the ordinance of today. And then everything else, maybe pull it to a separate list just for ease of reference, but we won't start working on anything until we've had a chance to workshop with you.
Yeah.
Okay?
So the schedule, the zoning amendment calendar, maybe everybody has it, but the first day to accept the petition is in November. The last day to accept the petition for, and those are just petitions, right?
Yeah.
For zoning. So our last day to post and publish notice for the first public hearing is January 6th. The last day to hold the public hearing is January 17th. So, you know, we really need to be spending October, November getting this wrapped up.
We usually recommend, if you'd like to hold 2 public hearings, that you hold the first in December and the second in January.
I think we did hold 2 meetings just because we were already on schedule.
We continued the first public hearing.
Oh, we didn't hold 2?
And then I think we held a second as well, but just to cover some bases.
Right. Okay. So unless anyone else, let's move on to our next agenda, which is just minutes. Should we take a look at minutes?
They're all edited.
Got a plan of action for this stuff.
So I think we had just the 2 sets, July 28th and August 11th, if that keeps on track. And I know I had a chance, since you met it through, and a few others had as well. So I'll just make a motion, and you
Yep.
guys can decide if they want to speak up. Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the minutes of July 20th, 2021 and August 11th, 2021 as amended.
Second.
Motion second, Charlene. Discussion, those in favor, ayes?
Aye.
Opposed? Are none. Okay. Let's just quickly just go around, see if anyone has any updates. Buzz?
Nope.
Gary?
I just gonna mention, James, not to put you on the spot, but I heard you're involved in economic development. So if you would share that sometime, not tonight, but wanted to mention that. And a plug for 9/11 Memorial Service Fire Department, 8:30, that's a Saturday morning
Where will that be, Gary?
at the fire station.
Okay.
We had conversation with briefly about roads, which we tabled not to go on until we have our meeting that we're all gonna be at on Wednesday. We had residents about setting up the noise, which I already talked to you about tonight with the ordinances. Recycled Percussions, you know who they are coming to Nottingham on Sunday night, which will be performing at the school. There are limited tickets to buy because of the minimum space for parking that we have. So if you're interested in going, I don't know how many tickets are left.
I'm not sure how many tickets are
Okay,
left, but
so-
they'll stop selling them when they need to.
But there are limited, so it's a nice family concert to go to. Should be a good time. So if anybody's interested, you know, it's a nice thing for the community, and the select board was working with the school, and we helped pay for a portion of that event to make it happen.
Great. Great for the community, in my opinion.
Yep.
Just a question, is the meeting next Monday in this room?
Wednesday,
Excuse me, Wednesday the 1st?
5 o'clock, we are gonna have probably pizza and stuff from Liars, so we'll be able to serve you guys the dinner. And it's gonna go 5 to 7 before this meeting continues afterwards. Wait, no.
We don't have a meeting after.
Right,
But it's
so,
gonna be in this room.
yes.
We were able to keep it to a Wednesday.
Right, we kept it to a Wednesday, sorry, yeah. So the hours are 5 to 7, so let's,
Starts at 5.
yes. Right.
Ed, anything?
I'm not gonna be here for the September 8th meeting, just a reminder, I'll email close to that date, but I should be here for the September 1st.
I don't have any other updates other than, you know, we'll catch up on the Stratford proposal. And we'll get that worked through.
We might actually have a planning secretary,
Does it say?
just so you know. It's not totally confirmed yet, but I think we got one.
A land use administrator,
Okay, sorry. Yeah,
Not a clerk.
my mentors.
not a clerk
Yes.
anymore.
Sorry, old terms die hard.
We have heard that, and that's
Yes.
that's welcome news. And
Yes, so
Yeah.
just,
Will be welcome news. Susan?
Yes, Peter Landry and the Tandys will be at the Conservation Commission meeting next Monday. We'll talk about how the driveway has been redesigned and whether we need to have a site walk. See where it's gonna be impacting things.
Yep.
And I'll have a report for you guys.
Great. Charlene?
I attended my first Stratford Regional Planning Commission policy meeting. So, and they mainly were going over some priorities that they had established back in June, and that they're, who's the individual that does the transportation?
Colin?
Colin's going to be making a presentation, 15-minute presentation, to a DOT public hearing that's coming up regarding kind of the Stratford regional, you know, items that we would like to see. So nothing really that impacts Nottingham.
In the SRPC world, I do our economic development planning, so the comprehensive economic development strategy that covers our region, that's in my bailiwick. Nottingham is one of our weird communities as that goes, because you are in an economic development district that was already formed before we were designated. So you're also covered by the SEDS that is updated by REDC. So it's sort of a weird space. We do our best to just talk to each other and collaborate with that. But if you have questions about how all of that works, we can talk another time. Other things that are going to affect all of you, we have secured a replacement for Steph. His name is Blair Haney. He comes to us with, I think, 20 years of experience in both municipal and regional planning in Massachusetts. And his start date will be September 13th. So you will tentatively expect to see him at your September 22nd meeting. I'm sure, just like we did with staff, like we do with most new staff, you might still see Jen or I accompany him for the first couple of meetings. But you know, we're fully confident that he'll be able to hit the ground running and keep this going. And then We already talked about SRPC membership. Just as an FYI, Jen sent a memo, I think just to Dirk and Ed, but I can go back and forward that to all of you so you can see it. It's just a letter about what dues would mean and membership would mean to the town of Nottingham, what your benefits would be for your dues. For example, with some of our CARES Act programming, we're offering some direct technical assistance to businesses, but then we are also looking at starting a new program in the next couple of months to do some record digitization on behalf of municipalities, probably securing a few interns and a portable scanner so that we can take old site plans, old documents, and actually do some of the legwork of getting those digitized for you. So that is some fun stuff in the future, and I can make a point of having that memo forwarded around to all of you so you can take a look.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Very good.
Then I think we just have to forward that on to the select board or as a formal request. I think.
Right.
The town
Yeah,
administrator.
I'll do that.
kinda-
I'll forward that on to the select board. And James, I'll forward it to the board.
Oh, okay.
If that's what we were talking about earlier, I thought we
Yeah, it
were
is.
talking about something different, but I'll forward that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take care of it. All right, that's all we have for tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I don't know who got it.
Gets it, but
I don't care.
we're
Sue got it.
unanimous.
Sue got it.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, James.
No problem.